Call the meeting to order, the special joint city council planning commission meeting. That's the amended agenda for April 27, 2021. Have the notice read regarding the Zoom telecommunication meeting protocols?
Yes, thank you, Mayor Garcia. Thank you for joining us for the April 27th, 2021 City of American Canyon Joint City Council Planning Commission meeting. This meeting is being held entirely virtually in response to the COVID-19 pandemic. The format for tonight's meeting will be similar to that of an in-person meeting. In addition to the Zoom platform, the meeting is being broadcast on YouTube and streamed live on the city's website. Channel 28 is currently down for maintenance. This is something that we just found out about. You will see members of the City Council and Planning Commission on your screen, along with members of city staff. All members of the public will participate in listen-only mode. Public comment is invited for non-agenda items during the public forum section of the meeting and on each agenda item. When the item that you wish to speak on is called, please follow these steps to make your comment. When the mayor calls a particular item and you wish to speak on that item, click the raise hand button of joining by computer. If joining by phone, dial *9 to raise your hand. When it is your turn, I will announce your name and invite you to speak. You may see a message saying, host would like you to unmute your microphone. If you get this message, click unmute myself and begin speaking. To unmute yourself by phone, dial *6 and begin speaking. Video will not be turned on, only audio. You have up to 3 minutes to make your comments to the Planning Commission. To the Planning Commission and City Council. At the end of the 3 minutes, I will ask you to conclude your comments quickly, and I will mute your audio once you're done. Please only press *9 to raise your hand for the item or items you wish to speak on, as raised hands will be cleared at the end of each item. The agenda for this meeting is available on the city's website. As a standard practice, committee members are allowed to comment one time on each agenda item. All votes for tonight's meeting will be taken by roll call. We ask for your patience and understanding when technical difficulties occur. This concludes my remarks.
Very much. Do we have the flag so we can do the Pledge of Allegiance, please? Very good. Please rise and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. We'll do roll call, please.
Yes. Councilmember Abadamas?
Here.
Councilmember Oro?
You're muted, Councilman.
Here.
Councilmember Washington?
Here.
Vice Mayor Joseph?
Here.
Mayor Garcia?
Here.
Commissioner Altman?
Present.
Commissioner Goff?
Here.
Commissioner Wong?
Here.
Vice Chair Malari?
Here.
Chair Navarro?
Here. Very good, thank you. Have we received any public comment?
We have received the public comments submitted to the council and commissioners via email. Those will be posted on the website. I do have a raised hand by Justin Hamilton Hull. Mr. Hull, I am asking you to unmute yourself.
Good evening, City Council mayors. Their way get it's so very hard to me when I walked down a hill watching Karen Dunmore. I see tall grass and I worry about there's gonna be fire over there, and their way I know we're probably gonna get ready to build a house soon. There's a way we get somebody to mow the grass on the hill and over there. So please, I know it's so tired because we need to get ready to build a house. Thank you.
Thank you. If you would communicate that to Mr. Hawley, we'll make sure that it takes care of weed abatement. It's certainly going to be a big issue as fire season gets closer and closer. Thank you. Any other public comment?
Yes, Karina Saravente. Please unmute yourself.
Hi, good evening. Thank you
Good
for
evening.
thank you for having this wonderful workshop. I won't be able to stay because I have a prior commitment. But I wanted to share with everyone that on April 29th, the USD, the district will have a bilingual workshop. We all know that a lot of the parents in our city and everywhere really have been asking for mental health workshops and resources. So on April 29th, 6 p.m., there's a bilingual workshop, and it has to do with collaboration, not confrontation. It's presented by Jaime Carras, and he's a wonderful, he has presented many workshops at the district, and so I invite everyone to, if you want some resources on mental health, to come and see the workshop. And the great part of it is that it's bilingual. So the other thing I wanted to invite you all is to the African American Coalition meetings. Unfortunately, that happens today at 6:30. It's on the last Tuesdays of the month, and all of those meetings are through Zoom, and you can find the links at the ACMS website or Facebook, and at nbusd.org or at their Facebook page as well. So thank you. I hope you have a really good meeting. I heard that there's going to be a lot to talk about, and so hopefully you guys will make the right decisions. Thank you so much.
Excuse me, the links available on most of those are at nbusd.org.
That's correct. They're on our district's website, the middle school website, and all of schools' Facebook page as well.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Is there another speaker? Public comment?
There are no additional public comments at this time.
Okay, we'll close public comment at this time. Move on to our business item. Business item B1, conduct a workshop to review permitted land use in the Broadway district specific plan.
Thank you, Mayor, council members, chair, and commissioners. Before I hand this over to our community development director, Brent Cooper, I wanted to take a bit of a trip down memory lane and kind of talk about how we got to where we are today, and talk about some of our hope, at least from the staff perspective, as to what we hope to accomplish tonight. And it's been a little while since we've all gotten together, and I think we're going to manage the Brady Bunch effect fine with the multiple bodies up on the screen, but it's good to see everybody getting together. So thank you all for being here. If we think way back to 2014, it's really when the Broadway district plan started to come to fruition. Some of you were in your respective roles back then, and others weren't. Some of you became involved later on and were either a part of the approval or came on board later as part of the implementation of this. But back in 2014, the Broadway district specific plan was really kind of just a fancy version of a housing overlay. In particular, the state HCD and ABAG and MTC wanted cities to provide more housing. They still do. And they came up with an idea called priority development areas. And these were areas where cities could focus their attention on getting housing units zoned and then presumably built. So the city, in order to stay abreast with the latest regional activities and state activities, created a priority development area along Highway 29, along Broadway. About 300 acres of land was ultimately put into the priority development area. And instead of just creating an overlay, which we could have done, that would have been very simple, the city went forward and created the specific plan. And with a ton of public involvement, we use the tool of a specific plan, which is, really a detailed, focused version of a city general plan. We use the specific plan tool to create a vision for Broadway that responded to what we understood that the residents wanted along the corridor. And incidentally, as the Broadway plan began to kick off in the PDA, that actually was around the time I began to work here in American Canyon. It was among the first things I was involved with, was the beginnings of the Broadway plan. And so, that plan focused on putting housing where previously it wasn't allowed. If we go back back to what the zoning code did before BDSP, there was not 1,200 units of housing zoned in that corridor. They were not permitted in the same way that they are now. And so it achieved one of those goals. It also really set the stage for defining how the infrastructure was going to look along the highway. This plan had a parallel path to a plan that was going on at the time from the Napa Valley Transportation Authority. That was the Highway 29 corridor study. And that plan really, the NVTA plan, the corridor study, really helped identify what this stretch of Highway 29 was going to look like. 6 lanes, class 1 bike pathways on the outside, underground utilities. And we integrated that into the BDSP along with the landscaping treatments and relatively short setbacks, et cetera. So the BDSP also was meant to align with that Highway 29 corridor study. And the third real benefit of the BDSP was to provide an economic development tool for underdeveloped and undeveloped properties along the highway. If we think about the commercial uses that existed at that time and compare them with what exists now, they're largely the same. There were some changes that were made, but for example, the commercial centers that were already developed, Walmart, Safeway, Canyon Corners, Canyon Plaza, et cetera, those commercial centers were left alone from a zoning perspective. They already had been developed. And there were a number of properties that still are along the highway, undeveloped or underdeveloped. And the process for BDSP at that time did not go through a big effort to change that. We heard from the property owners, those property owners of the undeveloped properties and underdeveloped properties that said, don't change us, don't touch our zoning, don't change what we're allowed to do. And the council and the commission at the time respected that wish of those property owners. And so we did move around some of the commercial zoning and created some sub areas. The home improvement overlay is one of the more notable ones. But in large part, there wasn't as much of a change on the commercial zoning as was from the residential perspective. That was a much more significant change. And so, in fact, our 2018 State of the City presentation was actually based on the newly completed BDSP and what we anticipated would be coming to fruition in the future based on that plan. At the time, we weren't necessarily aware of the litigation that would ensue, and we spent the balance of 2018 and 19 dealing with litigation related to the sequel lawsuit. Ultimately, that got resolved, but there was a bit of a hiatus on the implementation of BDSP because of that litigation. And then subsequent to that, we've started to see some of the fruits of the labor that have come about from BDSP. The Home to Suites Hotel, for example, has been approved. Circle K gas station has been approved. We have other planning applications that have come along. We have a variety of planning applications that Brent can talk about that are currently pending. But we've had some of those parts of the plan have come to fruition. But we also get the sense from both the commission and the council that things may not be going exactly as had hoped. That what is in the pipeline now may not exactly reflect what the hope was and what the vision was for BDSP. And so the safety valves that exist in our process have been triggered. We have a process to be able to change, to readapt, to modify, and change our thinking or tweak our thinking. And we have a process to do that. And so the commission last year began to think about some of these things and kind of raise their concerns up to the council. And the council likewise, hearing that and also having their own concerns, really is the impetus behind tonight and getting together to say, okay, if we're wanting to make some changes or modifications to the Broadway District specific plan, what should staff be thinking about to bring back? What changes might there be out there. We generally haven't heard a lot of angst or concern about the residential part of BDSP, the 1,200 units or any of the residential uses. What we've heard more is around the commercial uses, and that's why the staff report goes into great length to think about all of the permitted uses and everything that exists in that zoning code. So tonight, really what we're hoping to get addressed is, if there are concerns about allowable commercial uses, what changes should we be thinking about? In particular, gas stations. We currently have a 10-month, 15-day moratorium on gas stations, and absent further action by the council, that will expire in roughly next spring, if my math is right. So if there is a desire to make that permanent, we would like to know that, because we'd like to spend our time gearing up for what a permanent moratorium would be, so that we're not doing that at the 11th hour or the 10th month, if you will. We'd like to take care of that in due time. If there are other uses, quick serve restaurants, fast food restaurants, or hotels, those sorts of things, if there are commercial uses which are not seen as wanting to be part of the future, or if there's limitations that are not currently in BDSP that are desired, we want to start talking about those things so that we can adapt this plan in a way that the commission and the council thinks reflects what the community vision is. So with that, I'm going to turn over to you, Brent, and I think you got a presentation.
Thank you, Mayor and Planning Commission and City Council. Glad to give you maybe a brief presentation. City Manager covered a lot of territory, so I'll go through it very briefly because I know we'll have want to spend some time on dealing with the issues. So I'm going to share my screen and just kind of run through what we have for you. So hopefully you can see the cover page right now. So really very brief history. The Planning Commission requested the City Council provide some fuel station policy going forward. We received that on April 6th with adoption of a moratorium temporarily for fuel stations. And then as well, the council requested a more comprehensive discussion of Broadway district land uses. If we go back to the previous general plan before we had the Broadway, you'll notice that we had very little diversity in land uses. Yes.
Cooper, you're showing two screens. Can you get it to where it's one big screen right now? You're showing the preview slide.
Okay, apologize for that. Let's see. Let's try that again.
There you go. Thank you.
Okay, appreciate that. So if we are to, okay, the old general plan really had very little diversity in land uses. We had industrial to the north, open space to the south, and largely just commercial with a whole host of uses in the middle. Looking at the Broadway plan early on, we did come up with a variety of principles that focused on beautifying the corridor, improving mobility, enhancing retail opportunities, gathering places, really looking to provide some placemaking opportunities for the district. As the city manager mentioned, not all the properties sort of needed to be replanned. We have a number of uses that are already entitled and built and functioning fine. The areas in blue are areas that have under vacant and underutilized properties. Breaking this down, we have our 8 sub areas accommodating 1,200 multifamily dwelling units, as well as design guidelines and discussions of reducing the speed limit on Highway 29. There were a number of general plan amendments that accompanied the plan. We had 16 site-specific amendments to make sure that the zoning and the general plan and the specific plan were consistent. The zoning land use includes new districts, as well as some old ones that pre-existed that reflect the existing sites that were recently developed, and also some of the older legacy sites where the property owners requested that we kind of leave them alone. Some of the benefits of the Broadway District Plan, particularly the program Environmental Impact Report, is streamlining the development review and promoting economic development by providing certainty with mitigation measures, processing time, and compatible land uses adjacent to one another. So today, kind of where we are, we talked about, as Andrew mentioned, the fuel station moratorium, whether the council is interested in making that more permanent. Some of the issues that came with the fuel station that arose was auto-oriented nature of the use, the aesthetics, uses that perhaps might have greater use to American Canyon residents, and then also a large concern with greenhouse gas activities and impacts. Other potential concerns that we've heard at conjunction with the fuel station, maybe fast food restaurants. I'd like to explore what the source of that concern might be. Some of them might be the drive-through lane itself. They too, because of drive-through, is very frequent with fast food, could be the auto-oriented nature of them. Perhaps aesthetics. A lot of times you get the corporate architecture that may or may not fit with what we're looking for in the Broadway plan. Another issue might happen to be with, is this the right kind of use with respect to the brand? I've heard of maybe some stores are desirable, maybe others are not. That isn't insurmountable, but there are some complications with taking a course like that with respect to uses being treated equitably. And we tend to refer to standards that we measure and can evaluate, such as noise or smoke or aesthetics and the like. We do have tools at our disposal, such as an urgency ordinance. Obviously, the fuel station's one example. That was also used for other uses that we didn't have standards for, such as smoke shops, pawn shops, and payday lending. And so that process was used to establish those standards and then incorporate into our zoning code. We do have, obviously, things that come up that weren't anticipated. Private enterprise is very innovative. And so lately we have 2 applications for a single food truck on private property. I know that the mobile ordinance contemplates them roving around town and using private streets, but having a single truck parked permanently on private property is a new idea. There was some thought that maybe there might be a food truck court, and along with that, seating and landscaping and restrooms and the like. But you can't do that with just a single truck. They just can't afford the cost for all those amenities. And so this is something that we'd like to get some feedback on, whether or not this fits within the vision of the Broadway plan. Other uses that perhaps go along with that, we've had inquiry with maybe have a bonsai truck on private property over at the area there next to the old former bowling alley and Larry's Truck Toppers. There are also sites that are just difficult to develop. And we've heard about that with the Circle K, but there are many others as well. Some of the challenges have to do with narrow and small sites. I have an example here where it's only 85 feet deep. And so if you deduct from the property the front and rear setbacks, you lose 25 feet of that. And so it really constrains what you can do with properties when you try to redevelop them. And the Broadway District recognizes this and encourages sites to consolidate, if not the parcels themselves, but their access points so that we have fewer access points onto the roads and just better cohesiveness among the properties. Another issue that we talked about with the Hampton Inn Hotel, problematic for retail in particular, for mid-block parcels with visibility and site access. That's critical for retail, so that kind of makes it difficult to redevelop mid-block sites for that. Looking at other uses, it's more limited. Another issue has to do with we have an earthquake fault through town, and especially in the Broadway district. Here's an example of a particular parcel that's significantly impacted by the fault lines. It was identified, and per state law, there's a 50-foot setback that restricts habitable structures within 50 feet of either side of the fault line. So that can really impact what you can do with the property. And so that really speaks to the need for flexibility on uses so that we're open to economic uses that make sense given the constraints that they face. Other issues, as we look forward to amending zoning, potentially we'll want to have an eye on our general plan. Another factor is the Napa Airport land use, compatibility plan. These are also changes subject to the California Environmental Quality Act. And then we also have objective standards and a public process to consider these things. So with that, I'm glad to turn it open. I do have uses available if we want to talk about them individually, but that concludes my presentation. Glad to answer any questions you have and have a good discussion.
Well, Mr. Cooper, thank you. Mr. I'm just sorry, I'm just getting my screen set up here. Mr. Cooper, Mr. Hawley, thank you very much for the presentation this evening. Council members and commissioners, we've kind of had our preamble to what our evening discussion should be about. So that's very informative. I look forward to the conversations, all of us together. I really value the work you planning commissioners do, as well as my council colleagues. We face a number of challenges, and it's always about the collaboration it takes to come to a decision, but also about what's we envision for the future of American Canada. You know, this was a place that was very much unknown or unrecognized not too many years ago. And I think probably one of the important things, particularly for me, I'll start with that, is the appearance of the highway when you come into town. Aesthetics is important, defines a community. That's very high on my list. So with that, I would say it's open for questions or thoughts. Anybody have any impression with the presentation this evening, for example? Don't all jump in at once.
No, I'm okay. If someone else wants to, I'll defer, but
Go ahead, Vice Mayor.
more than happy. It looked like some of our council members were going to say something, so I'll defer and let others talk first.
Well,
I'm raising my hand. I'm using the hand feature.
okay,
So-
why don't we all do that, please? Yes, okay.
I'm not ready to give specific comments, although I do have thoughts. I think it's important for us as a group to try to figure out, remind ourselves the impetus of this. I know the presentation was there. This is actually, I feel like this has been led by the Planning Commission, meaning they came to us looking for direction with regards to a gas station. And that prompted, a moratorium and some things of that nature. But it also prompted the council to sit with the BDSP and ask ourselves, well, what do we want? And I think we all have our ideas. I would love to hear from the Planning Commission some of the struggles and challenges that you have that may come your way and how you guys have been thinking about it in terms of approving projects or applications that come through, and maybe where you've struggled or where maybe you might see improvements. And I think that will help us kick off the discussion. I think there's some context setting here that needs to be done. And then we can go on from there. I think that's a good way to discuss it.
Thank you, Mr. Orwell. We have Mr. Altman, your hands raised.
Yeah, thank you. I guess I'll start by saying before we get into Broadway District specific plan issues, I'll follow on Councilmember Oro's comments. I think that some stage setting needs to be done. I'm firmly of the belief that the council and commission, planning commission, should be meeting periodically in a planning sense so that we are in fact all on the same page. It was disappointing, to be honest, to hear what felt like the planning commission being blamed for the approval of the Circle K gas station when certain council members were not in favor of it. And I think we avoid all of that if we make it a habit to get together in a legally permissible fashion and talk about what our visions are. And this is something that, I think most people know. And Mr. Mayor, you, Vice Mayor, and myself are the only people, I believe, who go back to the original Broadway District Specific Plan process. And, I've made these comments about getting the commission and the council together for years, and they have generally not been heeded. And I think I'm hopeful that at this point, there will be an impetus to actually do this, because we're seeing some of the flaws of not getting together and talking about issues. So I hope that is of some value to people.
Thank you. Yeah. Use your raise hand feature on your screen if you want to talk.
Mr. Mayor, I've got my hand raised, even though I said I'd wait for others. Although I'll defer to Councilmember Washington, because I think I butted in last time when so let me go in after him.
Councilmember Washington.
Thank you, Vice Mayor Joseph. I just wanted to at least take this opportunity to say that I think that the Planning Commission, in my opinion, did a pretty good job based on with information and the structure they were given. So I know Mr. Altman mentioned that people who were on the council that were opposed to the gas station, which I'm one of them, may have had issue with the Planning Commission's decision. And I don't blame the Planning Commission. Kind of want to make sure that kind of gets out there. I think you guys do an outstanding job. I think based on the structure of the current plan that we set forth for you to make decisions on, I thought you guys were appropriate in your decision making. I just think that we need to be a little clearer when we set the policies to give you that benefit to make the decision, so we are a little bit more specific in what we're looking for the identity of our city and the way we want our city to look. So I want to be on the record to say that I think you guys do an outstanding job and are committed to our citizens and residents of American Canyon. So thank you.
Councilmember Washington, thank you for the thought. I know that probably expresses very much the sentiment of the council as a body in terms of your deliberative process and the decisions you come forward with. Hand up. Okay. Vice Mayor Joseph.
All right. Well, first of all, I appreciate the fact that we are having a joint session, and I totally concur with Commissioner Altman's suggestion that we do it annually, because I think, and not just with the Planning Commission, with open space, with parks and community services as well. I think it's important for the bodies to have a joint session, more or less to synchronize our values and positions, so that commissioners know what the council is thinking and vice versa. So I think it's an important annual event at least. The second thing, some general comments. First of all, I really encourage everybody to think in the context of the BDSP, but also the project initiation document that Napa Valley Transportation Authority is working through with Caltrans, because there's some transportation elements that are maybe not ready yet, but some of the stuff that is also baked into that process is what I would consider the beautification elements that are so critical. Sidewalks, bike paths, landscaping, undergrounding the utilities, those kinds of things that we need to expedite that process, because it will get us some of the amenities that we're looking for in the BDSP that we would have to come up with the money, or more realistically, developers would have to come up with the money to do. So I think we need to recognize the value of that process and make sure we take advantage of the good parts of it, and then work very effectively to make sure the transportation side is more realistic. But that's my first point. The second point is, a lot of times with economic development, cities have to make some investments to prime the pump, so to speak. And in the case of the Broadway District Plan, I think the most critical first step is a master drainage plan that could be funded through some of the leftover Measure A dollars that we have. And that master drainage plan could define, where the system, basically define where you need drainage and how it needs to be constructed, so that when a developer wants to develop a parcel on the corridor, he or she knows what they're going to have to do to get through that. Right now, in the absence of a comprehensive plan, they more or less are expected to figure out how to make it work. And even if they can do that, nobody really knows whether it's going to work in the context of the total corridor, or if it'll just work for their project and may be, counterproductive for the parcel next to them. So I think that's probably the most important next step, because it's something we have the money for and something we can manage. Beyond that, as kind of alluded to by staff, we've got to figure out ways to consolidate parcels. And I don't know what the answer is, other than I think we can make findings. As was pointed out, there's fault lines that unfortunately run through almost half of the parcels. There's certainly Caltrans doesn't want a bunch of driveways, so the bigger the parcel with a single driveway access, the better. And then there's got to be some documentation out there that says parcels that are under a certain size just are not economically viable. So I think we can use those types of findings to begin to put together a package, an ordinance that creates a minimum lot size for the corridor. And I would defer to our city attorney to figure out how to do it in a manner that doesn't get us sued. But that is something I think we ought to consider, because that is also kind of a key element in making things happen. Beyond that, I think we need to talk about a process to allow for changes. We're talking about gas stations, but the Hampton Inn proposal would also involve a plan change. How do we expedite that process? We can certainly go through the legal process, but is there a way that the council or the commission can kind of give the developer a heads up that, a thumbs up or a thumbs down? Because sometimes knowing that you're not going to get approval for the change, knowing that sooner is actually better than learning it later on. So we need to look at flexibility. Councilmember Oro has talked about incentives that we need to talk about to encourage the uses we want to see happen. We recognize we can't pick and choose brands, but we can certainly create incentives, and can use some discretion over who gets those incentives. And then the last thing is, we also need to figure out how to encourage relocations. There's some uses on the corridor that don't fit the model. And what can we do to facilitate their relocation? Some parcels or some businesses are not going to be motivated too much because they're making a lot of money as is and where is. But at some point, if the economy perks up, if the project plan plays itself out, there's going to be an incentive to acquire some of those parcels. And I want to make sure the city is in a position to facilitate that, rather than be somewhat of an impartial third-party player that oversees and regulates it. So those are my big picture concepts that I think we ought to look at in terms of making this plan a reality. Because ultimately that, to me, is the whole point behind a plan, is to make it happen, not just to have some good-looking pictures. Thank you.
As to the infrastructure, systemic look at that is well taken. We have had an opportunity to work with developers with some components of that, but those are makes the development decisions certainly a lot easier for developers. Better we find the hidden earthquake fault lines, et cetera. Find out what the drainage plan does with that. There's Councilmember always got your hands up. I think it's something, just before I get to that, something very important to us is the economics of it all. See, economics doesn't happen just in the city limits of American Canyon. It's regional. And what would be the interest for gas stations in American Canyon? It's probably the fact that there are about 50,000 cars a day comes from American Canyon. There's opportunity for business. So what type of business do we want to attract, seems to be the issue. And the greater question for me is, how do we market American Canyon? What do we have with our assets and our capacity to get things done in a way that is receptive to business communities? Are we telling the story out there? You know, I've run into people north of here and I'll say, oh, yeah, I'm mayor of American Canyon. And say, well, where's that? I say, well, you just drove through it to get here, wherever we are. You know, there's an aesthetic look that brands the city. There's an economic marketing that says this is what we want in American Canyon, and this is the type of business we welcome here. With that, Councilmember Oro.
Yeah, thank you. I think we're going places now, and Mr. Joseph set the stage for it. I want to pull us back a little bit. You know, when I hear a master drainage plan, I think it's probably a great idea. I don't know too much about it, but it's a detail that can work through, and that's why I wanted to discuss a little bit further the context. I think it was, rather than the implementation tactics, it was the direction to provide the commissioners, the planning commission, of where we're headed. One of the things I did here was flexibility, right? How flexible do we want it to be? Listen, I think everybody on this panel right now, in this Hollywood squares of activity and future, is interested in beautifying and improving that highway. We're all in agreement for that. I think what is coming before us and what will come before us a lot is what do we want to do to make that happen, and how and what do we want to see there? I think the Broadway district specific plan is good. What I want to know from staff in particular is, the plan is there, but what about all the sort of the details? Like, what do we need to worry about? Maybe the incentives that have always been suggesting is something like a drainage plan, right? Or maybe it's lumping those things together. Like, what is holding back sort of the investment, and what do we need to do to accelerate this? I'd like to hear a little bit about that. Would love to hear from the commissioners too, you know, your pause in this whole thing. Or maybe not even a pause, but maybe what direction are you specifically seeking? On the traffic thing, you know, there was an article this week in the paper, and I was, you know, named above the fold, and I was exasperated last week, honestly, because, you know, while Mr. Vice Mayor Joseph says that we should, you know, want to look at that, yes, we should. I want everybody to know that we do not have a good partner in NVTA. They have been dismissive, and I find it almost insulting that they have not heard anything or recommended anything that we as a community, and not only as a community, but a community that involves the whole valley, of what could happen here. The latest one was roundabouts. Before it was autonomous vehicles. Before that, it was bus lanes. It took no mention or consideration whatsoever of what we wanted to do in terms of putting sidewalks on there, making it safer for us, actually being livable and not just a highway. And, you know, we need to push that really hard of what we need and want, and kind of either act in concert together and not let these, you know, off fly-by-night recommendations happen. So that's my thoughts on traffic. If you go back and watch the council report or read the papers, it was very upsetting to me. But back to the bigger picture, what is it, the direction that you're needing? And then for the staff, it is, you know, we've created this plan. I think we've got the EIR done, but there seems to be more and more layers to this onion that we're not doing, and I'd like to understand that as well.
Good. Commissioner Altman, give your hand was next.
Yes, thank you. I guess a couple of more specific comments. I think when we talk about commercial along the highway, it's important to recognize that it was changing before the pandemic, but the pandemic has certainly accelerated changes in terms of not what commercial means, but what retail means to a large extent. Many of the chains and stores that we're very familiar with are struggling like mad. I don't know that Gap is building new locations. I think they're struggling to save the ones that they have. We have seen bankruptcy filings from major department store chains. We need to recognize all of this when we're looking at these things. To me, at this point in time, retail, and this is where flexibility is needed, for sure. But if I were to define retail today, retail is food and related. So whether that be grocery stores, restaurants of any sort, farmers market, any kind of food related stuff, it's medical. Doctor's offices, dentist offices, whatever, in that field, imaging facilities and all of that. And it is services. And that is what retail in 2021 is primarily composed of. None of that is likely to be quote unquote attractive highway destination items. Are there exceptions? Yeah, there are exceptions in certain areas. But some of those areas are and I've said this for years since I first moved here, which was in 2004. The biggest thing I would love to see American Canyon be able to land, because one of the things I've said repeatedly is I want American Canyon, my personal vision of our city is I want American Canyon to be the recreation zone for the Napa Valley. I want active recreation. So I'd love to see something like an REI. But REI locates where there are much larger population centers in the immediate area. And I don't know that, given our current size, we're anywhere near what they would need in order to open a location here, given that they've got one in Marin, they've got one in the East Bay, and so on. So I think understanding and being flexible with what retail means and with what commercial overall means is really critical as we look at this. I also think that when we look at the way the zones were laid out and all, that there are certain things, and I said this during the original Broadway District Specific Plan process, the one thing that I think we need to address, and I know it's permissible under definitions, but I think we would really be taking a big step forward as a community if we were to dedicate a portion of this plan to what I will broadly call youth entertainment. We need to develop means to keep the kids in this community active and in this community occupied so that they have things to do. And right now we have very little in the way of entertainment, for youth up through college age, basically. And I think we really need to, as we're discussing this, we need to have a focus on that area as well.
Good, thank you. Maybe Councilmember Albandamas will be next, and then we have Commissioner Wong.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you, commissioners and council, for being here and for calling for this joint meeting. It's been said several times, I agree that we should do this more often. I just want to bring us back to the basics, right? So this meeting stems from the Circle K gas station approval, right? So I think all of us have been in our respective capacities long enough, or have lived in the city long enough to know that our constituents don't want any more gas stations and don't want any more fast food restaurants, right? That's the bottom line. I don't believe that we want to sit here and talk about what specific businesses we want to see on the Broadway District Specific Plan. I do agree that we need to have that flexibility tied in. But after that gas station decision, I was hearing things such as the planning commissioners felt like their hands were tied. So for me, the flexibility lies in that, for instance, we have a home improvement district. We might have an application come before the planning commission to put something there that just seems to go better on that parcel than something that's home improvement related. In that respect, I would appreciate for the Planning Commission to use their discretion and not necessarily deny the application because it's not a home improvement type business. Maybe send it back to the council and say, hey, we think this is a great idea, but that's not what Broadway district specific plan calls for. What do you think? I don't believe that planning commissioners' hands are tied. I believe that you do have discretion, and whenever you feel like you don't feel comfortable making a decision or that it conflicts with council policy, then you should always be able to have a means of bringing it back to the council. And that's kind of where I am with this, right? I think we all know, I think we're all on the same page in that we know our residents don't want any more gas stations. Our city is so small and we don't want it flooded with gas stations and fast food restaurants. We continuously talk about the beautification of Highway 29, and I don't think that means to any of us a gas station on every corner or a McDonald's on every other corner, right? And that's where I like to get feedback from the planning commissioners on, you know, what businesses have approached you and how do you believe that fits in with the vision of the city at build out.
Thank you. Commissioner Wong.
Thank you. I'm glad we're having this opportunity to speak together. I know when we discussed the Circle K, it was a very intense discussion. We actually delayed it. It took us 2 meetings to get through it. And I know if you go back and you listen to the meetings, I had a lot of concerns that I raised because this would have been 4 and there was potentially 3 more in the queue. But based on everything that we discussed, and as well as based on all the discussion that the community has provided online and, you know, on Nextdoor and past testimony, and specifically, I think we can all talk about what we want to see in the Broadway district specific plan, but what we wanted was guidance from council specifically. If we don't want gas stations in the city, then there should be a moratorium and they should not be allowed. Not, it's allowed on a conditional use permit, use your best judgment. Well, in the decision that we faced, it was an unusual parcel. Commissioners were split. There was arguments both ways. I'm not going to go rehash what we discussed over several hours. So the guidance we want is, if you feel that strongly about it, then write it that way in the Broadway district specific plan. Moratorium on gas stations, we don't want it. I mean, on the news all the time, I hear about cities like Lafayette. They haven't had development for 20 years. Why? Because they don't allow it in their zoning. So if our residents want that, I hope they're here today to speak up for that and give you the support to make those types of decisions. Because I don't think that it is fair in the back of your minds to say, we don't want gas stations, but then to allow it and have those types of businesses come before Planning Commission. Every time that you talk to a resident, their concerns are always traffic, their concerns are water. I mean, basically, we live in a small town and everybody wants the look and feel of a small town, but we all want the services of a big city. We want the stores, we want a Trader Joe's, we want an REI. You only get those things if you're a big city and you have traffic and you have development. So you can see we're sort of at this crossroads, and I think we need to be realistic and we need to be direct on what we want and what we realistically can do. I mean, myself personally, I'm not here to be a crusader on the Planning Commission. I listen to everybody and what they say they want. I don't necessarily vote as to how I would vote if I were representing my interests as an individual. You know, I have an electric car. I have solar on my house. I mean, I totally believe in the climate crisis, climate change and whatnot. I mean, if it were me, just me alone acting for my own interests, I may have voted very differently than I actually did. And just in closing, I think one of the things we should think about is looking at our overall strategy as to how do we get the businesses we want to see here. I mean, piggybacking on something what the mayor said, all these gas stations, they want to come to 29 because they want all this pass-through traffic. They don't want our cars. They want all the cars going up valley. Whereas I think as a resident, as someone who lives here, I'd like to see businesses in the Broadway District specific plan that are things that I would like to walk and shop at, things that appeal to me as a resident. And so those are kind of two different things, right? We're a small community. So the big box stores, they don't look at us and say, cha-ching, profit. I'm going to bring my business to American Canyon, that little tiny suburb. So maybe we need to look at, have an overall strategy to entice the businesses that we want. Maybe we want to focus on small businesses. Maybe we want to focus on local businesses. Maybe we want to give them some tax incentives, permit incentives to say, hey, we want you here in American Canyon. We're a unique community. We think you'd fit in here great. And maybe that's how we sort of, build our profile as a city. That's just one of the thoughts I have. And I look forward to hearing what everyone else has to say. Thank you.
Thank you. Something to consider for the Broadway specific plan in the district is with the ruins at Vintage Ranch coming along. This will be something that will attract a lot of visitors. It's a unique event center planned for that area. So that interest also generates more interest in a Broadway specific plan for those types of businesses that would serve those communities that come through. So that's something to be thinking of when we look at the Broadway specific plan. What will be like when there's large events happening at the ruins. They have an opportunity to build an amphitheater there. The place clearly can attract a lot of visitors. It's unique. And a lot of visitors, that's what they're looking for. Not the usual thing that you find anywhere, but this is industrial ruins have turned out to be a great draw wherever they are and the way they're utilized. So something to put in the mix. Councilmember Alvarez, your hand's raised.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. I just wanted to respond to Commissioner Wong really briefly. I absolutely appreciate what you just said. However, when it comes to putting moratoriums on things, I believe we're on the same page regarding the gas stations and the moratorium on gas stations. But at the same time, we can't put moratoriums on everything, right? So, for example, I believe we have a lot of hotels in American Canyon, and we have 3 or 4 more coming or anticipated. So what do we do? Ban hotels at this point? Ban fast food restaurants, then start banning grocery stores because we have a Safeway and a Walmart, and let's say we do get a Trader Joe's or a Sprouts at some point, then do we ban grocery stores? So we're talking about flexibility, but at the same time, we're talking about, for me, I want to give planning commissioners the discretion, because what if we get a parcel that's only suited, the best and highest use for it is a hotel, but we just put a ban on hotels and we can't put anything on that parcel. So I would like the planning commissioners to have that kind of flexibility to advise the council and give us your opinion and let us know, hey, we believe the highest and best use for this is a hotel, but it's zoned for a school, for example. So that's where I am in regards to, putting moratoriums on everything. But like I said, I believe we are all on the same page when it comes to the gas stations. The second part is I absolutely agree. There needs to be a balance between trying to bring things that are, destination type businesses that bring tourists in and traffic, and what our residents want to see here. There's got to be a balance. We can't stop bringing in traffic and we can't stop bringing in tourism, because those things are going to get us, the streets that we want, the parallel roads to Highway 29, who's going to pay for those or help pay for those if we're not allowing developers to build destination type businesses. And at the same time, we need that traffic, like Commissioner Wong said, to entice businesses to come here. They're not going to come here to go bankrupt. They want to come here to make money. That's the reality of it. So I agree with that. We need to find our balance in that sense. And those are my comments for now.
Thank you. Councilmember Joseph.
Yes, well, I appreciate all the comments, and I really do think that we are getting the kind of dialogue that all of us, I think, expected and hoped for. So that's a good thing. One of the comments I wanted to mention, I appreciate Commissioner Wong's discussion about, that almost competing issue. You want to be a small town city, but you want the amenities of a big town. And it got me to thinking, if there was a way for staff to do some analysis along the lines of saying, a community of this population can generally attract these types of businesses, and if you're bigger, these types and so forth, so that we more or less have a continuum that says, hey, 20,000, we can get the following. If we grew to 30,000, we could pick up more businesses. If we were 50,000, we might get a full set of silverware or something. So that there is some ability for us as well as the community to almost sit there and say to themselves, I might be willing to live with this much population if it got me something. Years ago, when we only had about 8,000 or 9,000 people and we didn't have a grocery store, the developers were being pretty clear. If you can approve, I think it was 500 or 700 homes, that'll get you a grocery store. And sure enough, we approved, well, a lot more than 500 or 700 homes, but we approved those homes, and sure enough, the Safeway project happened. So I think it might be very educational for all of us if we could see that kind of a diagram that gives us a sense of how big do we need to get the kinds of things we want, and that may help us figure out where that optimal level is. Just a suggestion. But again, I really appreciate the dialogue that's going on, and I hope we keep it up.
Thank you for that. I just want to point out that in terms of shopping, Vallejo shops our Safeway and our Walmart, and we shop their Costco. So to me, that's why I keep coming back to that argument. A lot of economics is regional, and what you can have something in one city that the other city doesn't have that attracts shoppers there and helps that local economy, and vice versa. So I think some analysis of looking at what might we be able to go. I mean, I get the Trader Joe's one a lot. I know we all hear that. Frankly, I had a woman some years ago say, how come you don't have a Neiman Marcus like I had in San Francisco when I lived there? I said, well, why'd you move here? Well, because it's a small town, it's quiet. I said, well, unlike San Francisco, Trader Joe's, Vallejo's about 120,000. I'm not really sure the size of Benicia, we're 20,000. So somewhere I think that's going to put us close to 200,000 people in terms of a regional market. That's why I get back to how are we marketing American Canyon for a development? What incentives can we give them to come to build here? We have some really good qualities. Safe city, good schools, it's quiet, very homey, a lot of outdoor recreation activity. These are types of things that draw people. And over and over again, I ask new residents, what brought you to American Canyon? And they mention those things. It's small, it's quiet. There's a lot of outdoor activity I can do. You got good schools. It's a very safe community. To that, let's see, who was next here? I think maybe Commissioner Altman? Yes, go ahead, sir.
Great, thank you. I want to just kind of jump and piggyback on Vice Mayor Joseph's comments as well as yours, Mr. Mayor, in that, yes, having information regarding what size we need to be, not just as a specific city, but as within the region, because as you've pointed out, Mr. Mayor, a lot of these decisions, and as I I think alluded to earlier, are regional based. And so, the question really becomes how wide is the region? What's the travel time or mileage or whatever that's being used? And I don't know that information by the developers in terms of determining where to locate. But I think that part of this, and I think it's one of the challenges, big challenges, is that I think that we all understand this, but I think the general public has no clue. And until we start trying to educate the general public and providing this kind of information, we're going to continually get calls for, oh, we want a Trader Joe's. Why can't we get a Trader Joe's? Well, we're not big enough for a Trader Joe's. And Trader Joe's is not that far away and they're not going to compete with themselves by locating multiple locations within the same area where they know they're already attracting the people. So I think it's really critical that we work on that kind of transparency and education about how this stuff actually works. And, I throw that candidly at staff. I mean, it's really, we've got a variety of tools with the website and various other pages we've got. But I think providing that kind of information, not necessarily specifics, but in broad terms, so that we can direct people to check it out and people can start to understand where decisions come from, would help bring down at times the level of angst that we all at times hear in the community.
Thank you. Mr. Goff?
Thank you, Mayor. First, thanks for the Mr. Goff. That's all I hear all day long. I was hoping for a Commissioner Goff or something. First off, I just want to, applaud everybody here. This type of conversation, I think, is doing wonders for everybody. And then my other thing is really going back to kind of where this all started, which was around Circle K. I think the Planning Commission did an excellent job. We discussed it, as Commissioner Wong mentioned, throughout a couple of meetings. I think the frustration part to us came in the fact that we had those dialogues, we went through that process, and then when it moved up, the moratorium occurred, and I think that was, okay, you guys stop what you're doing. We need to go back and rethink how you process that. I think there was a time in the middle of that where we could have froze and had those discussions before moving forward with that plan, and kind of, the developer of that plan and the project, his frustration's got to be through the roof. He spent a lot of time and a lot of energy meeting all those things that we asked for. He bent over backwards and I think did an outstanding job. Then it moved up to City Council, and all of a sudden additional voices came in that weren't necessarily heard during that process. That kind of shuttered things down. So I think, as somebody mentioned earlier, I think it was Councilman Joseph, about there needs to be a process in place that kind of we fall back to when these things come into place. Part of it is these type of meetings. I think we should, as everybody had mentioned here, this is a great thing to do. I think we should do it at least annually and review some of the development that's going on in the city and things that are on the books for possible development. There's a lot of things that were talked about here, and one of the things was, Mayor talked about the law of economics is regional. And I think that also comes down to when we look at our city itself, the different development plans we have in our city, they impact each other significantly. As an example, just thinking of Circle K, that plot of land, and what is now transitioning around Oak Hill and that development, which is right outside Broadway's specific plan, yet that development is now closely linked to some of the development around Broadway specific in that area. So I think we have to keep that in mind, that all of these plans are fantastic. We need to do that planning, but they are all dynamic. We need to be able to have that flexibility to dive back into a plan and look at that plan. And that's what this process is for. So I'm enjoying this. I'm enjoying everybody's, participation and communication. I wish there was more community involvement. I would like to hear more people, voices. I know a couple of people mentioned everybody here knows that there should be no more gas stations or no more fast food in our city. I don't hear that. Where I spend my day, all they want is fast food. I can guarantee you that. So it depends on who you're talking with on what you hear. Gas stations, I agree. That's probably, we've got enough in our city and there's enough outside of our city directly connected. But, it really comes down to the voice. Even the development of the Broadway specific plan, we're a city of 20,000 people. I think probably 50 voices were involved in that. When it really came down to defining that. So I think the communication comments by Commissioner Altman are hugely important. Trying to get involvement. And I know it's very, very difficult. Trust me, I spend my days trying to get people involved. But it's something that we really have to take to heart. And it's really kind of selling our city to our inhabitants. Because I think there is that issue of small town, big city. Yeah, we're a small town, but we are directly connected to a very large city. So when people look at us, they don't say, oh, here's American Canyon, there's a fault line, no business, nothing transitions across that between Vallejo or the county. So we have to keep all those things together, which makes all these things very, very complex. So I think communication is the key, but greater participation by the public, I think, would really beneficial. And you all know that. It's just hard to get there and hard to get them involved. That's what I got. Thank you.
Thank you. Commissioner Miller?
Thank you, Mayor. I mean, this is great. We have the opportunity to really gather our thoughts, to really express what we feel. You know, and jotting down a few notes, a few things for myself as a citizen is the fact that I do want to grow. I do want the city to grow into that big city place. But then also I think about the family that I'm raising here and the small towns, the small businesses that we would like to have come into the town, so I can walk to the store like Commissioner Wong said, or to enjoy kind of a meeting in the park or anything like that. One thing I think, Mr. Goff, you've hit on the head is, you know, really making a campaign for our citizens to understand that our role here is difficult. I hear things on next door through my friends and family that live here, like, why are you guys getting more housing? Why are you doing this? Why can't you get this? And, you know, it's really difficult to educate them on saying, well, that's just not how, it's not easy. This is the plan. This is how it works. I think from coming out of this workshop here, I just like to know personally, you know, where we need to unite as a vision of what we want American Canyon to be. And then we need to also educate our citizens on that vision. You know, I think we need to get more community involvement. We need to spend more time out there in the community to really understand the needs and the wants, so that we make these educated decisions. We go back to, you know, the region and we say, hey, here's what the desires and the wants are that our community is needing. We're the voice, right? We are all here as being that one voice, and I think that we need to unite. Granted, we all have our own personal opinions on developers or certain businesses coming into town, but we all know that our duty is the greater good of our community. And that's where I want to make sure that whatever we decide as far as new businesses and growth, we're strategically understanding the capacity that we're trying to build and at what length. And that's just a few of my thoughts. I'm sure I'll have more. But another thing is, like, I really do appreciate this. I think we should do this more often. The whole annual thing is like, it seems so long, but I definitely think it should be more frequent than annual.
Thank you. See, I've got 4 hands up. Sorry, I can't remember who was next here.
I believe it was me.
I think so. Okay. Councilman Robinson.
I just don't want to forget my thought. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I believe something that may be helpful is something that we did work on for a while and then stopped, and that's our city's economic development plan. In that plan, we did talk about some of what Vice Mayor Joseph was saying regarding studies on what is feasible to bring here and what we need to do to get them here. And we also talked about, I believe it was Commissioner Altman that was talking about how to advertise our city and bring in the businesses that we want. And I even remember, and correct me if I'm wrong, but I even remember us talking about creating brochures that we can give to developers to bring in the types of businesses that we're looking for. And I'm sorry, Mr. Goff, I was about to call you Commissioner, but I've never called you anything but Mr. Goff my entire life. You began talking about explaining to our residents as well. There was a public engagement process there. And I agree, it is very difficult to get people involved, especially in council meetings that run until 10:30 at night, planning commission meetings that I don't think you guys run as long as we do, but the general public isn't interested. However, I'm looking at this panel and each and every single one of us reaches a different constituency. And I think it's incumbent upon us to figure out how to reach our peers, right? So we're always being approached about things like traffic and Trader Joe's and development and what's going on in the city, but we don't very frequently post on our social media about, last night we had a council meeting where we decided to put a moratorium on gas stations. Any input, family and friends, this is why, this was my thinking. None of us or I don't want to say none of us do that, but I don't think we do that as often. And we're always talking about public engagement, but right now, social media is huge. And a lot of our constituents are getting their information through Facebook. It's just the reality. And I know not everyone is on social media. That's just one idea for how we can personally, this panel, members of this panel can personally reach our own constituencies. I know it's time consuming, but this is what we signed up for. And so a little bit wrapping it all back up, I think we should re-pick up our economic development plan and adopt it at some point. And I think that would be very helpful in guiding the Planning Commission and guiding the council in terms of what businesses we want approved and what kinds of things we want to see in the BDSP and elsewhere.
I'm sure out of that will come those types of marketing opportunities to reach a larger developer group. Mr. Hawley, did you have a comment?
I do. I see there are other council members with comments.
Yeah.
It's been a great conversation. It's what's interesting to me, and Brent, I think would share some of this, is the multiple purposes that Broadway was serving, the Broadway plan. You know, if we think back, it was for residential, it was for economic development, it's for transportation infrastructure. Almost all the dialogue tonight has been around different economic development ideas. And it's interesting because, you know, a lot of the reason for even having this meeting and getting together was around one particular project, the Circle K project. But it's, as Brent and I look at to be implementers of this and to bring items to these bodies, we're looking for a little bit of specificity. There was some comment. Do we want a moratorium on gas stations? Like we need some concrete action. Do we want a moratorium on quick serve, which would include Burger King, In-N-Out, Chick-fil-A, and any other really popular or unpopular fast food restaurants? Do we want a moratorium on hotels? We don't need answers tonight, but what we need is those things are worth looking at. We need direction on those sorts of uses are permitted now and accelerated in the Broadway plan, because the Broadway plan, the purpose of it was to accelerate development, to a ton of flexibility, and to take those undeveloped parcels and turn them into something from economic purposes. And so if that's a little too fast and if that's a little too hot or a little unacceptable with that sort of accelerant, we need to know that, and we need to put the governors on, which would be the opposite of economic development. But we need to put the governors on and make sure we're crafting in the right direction. And that's the concreteness that Brent and I are hoping for. And I don't mean to downplay this awesome dialogue, which has been great, but it really has only focused on one part of Broadway. And if those other parts like residential and transportation infrastructure are okay, then we can focus on the ED side of it, and that's fine. But I wanted to make sure we hadn't lost all of the parts of what BDSP is, and as we're looking at that. So thank you for allowing me to come on, Mayor.
Thank you. Councilmember Oro.
Yeah, I'm glad we're all taking a step back and having a breather moment about this, and that's what it was. And when the gas stations came to us, and then the hotel came to us, this conversation was needed. The way the conversation is headed tonight, to me, feels like almost hints of anti-development, and that may not be the intent, but that's what I'm hearing. There's also this conversation about involving the public. And I would like to remind everyone that I've been here for 16 years and I have been involved in driving many of these initiatives forward. Been involved very much with the Watson Ranch project, been very much involved with the BDSP. I have met hundreds of people, dozens of people at least, along the way to get their input of how to move this city forward. We actually have three things here. We have the BDSP, Watson Ranch, and the Green Island Road District. All of those things are moving forward in a way that has been initiated by the people and by this commission and by this council. And, you know, I don't want to, we've done a lot. We've done great work. I think what Mr. Hawley was saying is give us direction on some concrete things. We keep coming back to specific items and examples of, you know, grocery stores and sport outlets and gas stations. What we need is to not fall into another study, another analysis paralysis kind of thing. We did that with BASP. We spent 15 years on Watson Ranch. We're just now getting Devlin Road done in the Green Island. We've done those things. I would encourage this body here to look for ways to provide a framework rather than specificity of certain things that we want to continue to develop the BDSP. I am in favor of moving forward on the plans of BDSP, providing a little bit more guidance and clarity around it. The word I used, and I think it was a little bit overlooked, was flexibility. One of the things that I think needs to happen in this, and I think the commissions, and I think I heard this from the commission, give us concrete examples. And like, I don't know what's going to come up here, but you have the flexibility and the power to suggest that. And you just did that, and it worked out well with Circle K. Here's the guidance. We were concerned about it. We continued it. Oh, and by the way, we're asking something from the council to provide us further direction. The direction was, we're going to put a moratorium to give us to think about it a little bit more, right? Let people come to you. What I don't want is to be able to have a good project come in, and because it just doesn't wiggle its way in between a fault line of an earthquake or a parcel, that we're going to reject it. We ought to consider it and welcome it, because those are dollars and investments that are going to do the big things of Broadway, which is beautify that highway and bring investment, improve the community, provide those services. And I just want to be careful that, we don't send staff back off to go study something else, because if we let it happen, I think these good things will come. And I'm hoping that everyone keeps that in mind. And if you disagree with that, please state it, because I'll have major concerns, because right now the status quo isn't going to work, right? You have an ugly highway, and you have a transit agency that isn't cooperating with us. We kind of need to figure that out. If you want the status quo, then that's fine. But I don't think that was the intention of the public that spent years putting this plan together and bringing it to fruition.
Thank you. Councilmember Joseph.
Yes, and I appreciate Councilman Oro's comments, because I would agree. I think as a community, we still have to do some more growing, partly because there's a lot of vacant land, partly because, in my view, when you facilitate development, you usually can leverage a lot of infrastructure that we need to get it as part of that. So that, for example, if we develop Watson Ranch, as we develop Watson Ranch, we're going to get roads and amenities that we would have to kind of finance and all of that. So there are trade-offs, not just in terms of growing too big versus getting the retail we want, but also by permitting development that leverages the infrastructure we would otherwise have to come up with. So I do think we've got to grow, and I'd like to kind of start moving towards getting a consensus in response to the city manager's concerns that we do need to provide a little more concrete direction. I think it is great that we can all discuss our concerns and perspectives, but we do need to give staff something to work with. And I'd like to do a couple of things in that regard, is kind of go back over some of the things that I think we can work on. First and foremost, dealing with that drainage study, which is not like a lot of other studies. This is something concrete that the end result would be a developer would know what they have to do to build their part of the system. So again, a drainage study to figure that out, figuring out some program that we can consolidate parcels. I think we've talked about flexibility, and I think that's great. In terms of what we want to encourage, I frankly like Commissioner Altman's breakout, food-related stuff. And in that regard, getting back to the question on the food trucks, I'm a little ambivalent on those individual uses because they're just individual uses. But I would love to pursue something a little more appealing, and that is kind of a combination food truck farmers market. and maybe on a high-profile corner along the 29 corridor, in which the city may have some land available. So for me, I'd like to explore that as a specific project that could provide both a farmer's market venue as well as that kind of rotating food truck addition. And I do believe the Chamber of Commerce might be a sympathetic partner in that regard. But in general, as Commissioner Altman pointed out, food-related stuff, medical services, and then I'm breaking out recreation and in particular youth-oriented entertainment. I think those are areas that are very realistic. I'd love to be able to say we should try to get a Target or some kind of department store, but I don't think that's realistic at a number of the levels. So if we kind of zeroed in on those four categories, I think you'd be able to develop a marketing strategy that you could show some success and to start filling in the underutilized parcels. So I think those are, for me, those are the areas I think we should focus on in terms of the types of businesses we want to attract. I think the final point is whether the community likes it or not, probably a higher mix of residential when the dust settles than retail, only because of the reality, the dynamics of the current retail and e-commerce and all that. If we want to fill up all of our land along the corridor, it's probably going to be more residential than retail. And I don't think that's necessarily bad, because at some point it will begin to facilitate more economic opportunities. And if we do the transportation thing right, it won't be as unappealing. But those are my points. I think we can identify a number of specific action items and strategies and kind of formalize that into something that becomes more of an action plan.
Thank you. Councilmember Washington.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. Just real quick, I've heard us say a couple of times that we need to educate the residents. I actually think that when I've gone into residents' homes and talked with them, they pretty much educate me. We have a very educated community here in American Canyon with people that I think somebody mentioned they get frustrated when it comes to city council meeting or the planning commission because they can't get their opinions in. They can't talk more than 3 minutes. So it's upon us to go into those residents and start talking to the people of the community that put us inside the office. I heard someone mention that, stats and death by data. But I think we could compare ourselves to like cities. Vice Mayor Joseph mentioned it earlier that, what are other cities doing? I mean, how hard is it to benchmark what other cities are doing? I mean, we hear all the time, can we get a Trader Joe's? Can we get a Sprouts? And then I hear our own body say, no, we can't do that because we don't have it. But if you just benchmark 2 cities over, go down to Pinole, they have both. And they're just as big as us. So sometimes we may need to get out of our own way, listen to what the educated residents of our cities are saying, and maybe, talk to some of our peers in other cities and benchmark what they're doing and how they're marketing their cities to be effective and productive. And stop going in this circle of, just like we're running in a mousetrap or on a mouse or whatever you call it, thing that the circle that keeps the animals running. We just, I just think that we need to start something new. And if we're going to educate people, we may need to be inside of their homes to do that education. And it's not that hard, and I think that each one of us, I think somebody else mentioned that we all have a group of people that support us and put us in office. If I get 1,000, 3,000 people that voted for me in to talk to them about what they want, I guarantee you that we'll get some decisions made. So just food for thought, benchmarking, those are things that are out there already. What cities are being successful in their planning? And I want the planning commission to know, I got your back. I mean, it's okay even if we have developers come into town that we have to say no to because they don't meet the level of quality that we want, because that's the other issue. What's the quality? We can say fast food, but there are different types of fast foods out there. I tell you what, Chick-fil-A is knocking it out the park, and places like Amy's Fast Drive-Thru places where I've actually reached out to talk to them to say, hey, look, talk to my planning commission or talk to my chamber of commerce CEO. You know, what are we doing on our end to also market our city? I mean, I'm proud to be from American Canyon. I tell everybody that I meet, I'm from American Canyon, and you should bring your business to American Canyon. You know, that's what we should be doing. And that's all I'm asking us to do is just, hey, be the marketing person. Don't sit there and rely on Brent to do it all. I mean, he's doing a great job. Brent, you're awesome. But we have our parts to do as well, and not just wait for the next election period to start being inside of people's homes. Do it now while there's not an election period.
Right on. Commission Chair Navarro.
Yes, thank you, Mayor Garcia, and thanks for really handling this conversation very well. Your guidance and leadership in this has been really excellent. I don't have much to say. I think my fellow commissioners have covered everything I wanted to cover. I just want to make sure it's clear to the council that we don't feel our hands are tied. I don't think as a commission. We're pretty thoughtful, and we do our deep analysis. We read quite a bit of stuff. We ask a lot of questions. We listen to both sides, as we did with the Circle K, and we do look for the highest and best use of the land, and ask about different options or opportunity. But just to be clear, we do not drive the agenda or the priority. And that's where I think the gap is. And so we really need a venue. And I don't know if it's just joint meetings like this. I think more of like planning workshops where we're really digging deep into the Broadway district specific plan, or into the overall plan that is due for update. I think it's in those venues we understand everybody's perspective, priorities, but there also needs to be some sort of this, kind of prioritization, of lack of a better word that I can come up with, from the elected body as to what we should be looking for, or to promote and to push forward, or what we should be asking more difficult questions on that we don't want. So we didn't know that everybody in American Canyon, I agree with Commissioner Golf, that there was this big resistance to too many gas stations. So we really, when you look at it, if you do the analysis and you listen to what we would listen to, it currently is the best and highest use of that section of American Canyon. So we didn't go into that eyes closed, and we didn't go into that with feeling our hands were tied, and we don't have that feeling. But I also want to just say that I just want to clarify that we don't set the agenda. That is set by staff, which is kind of following the lead of the elected body. And so we have an awesome staff. They do very good due diligence. We ask questions on the quality, the background of the developer, of the people doing it, what's the intentions, what's their history, all of these different things. And staff does their homework very well, and they have very thorough processes. So we're just here to look at, say, from a technical advisory group that cares about the community, wants to make sure that the impact is going to be positive, and that the rules are all met and everything's checked off. We're the guardrails, but it's actually you guys as the elected body to make those decisions. So if you help us with giving some guidance, some prioritization, a sense of clearer vision, we will follow along with that. So that's really all I wanted to say.
Thank you. Commissioner Wong.
Hi. I like what Chair Navarro had to say, and I do agree with that. We do want, better and more open communication. I've always been a big fan of that transparency, and I really would like to see more community engagement in these decisions. I know for myself, thinking back to the Circle K meeting in September when we discussed it the first time, there was very little community input against the gas station. And even though there was a Napa Register article, when we discussed it again the second time, still very little community feedback. I think our residents are very smart, they're very informed, but they don't understand the business development process. It's only after, I guess, when the timing just was not right for all this community input, even for, I guess, for any of city council who may have been unhappy with the decision. I mean, there was a lot of time, a lot of process, you know, for it to have gone a different way anytime between September and October. And then nothing happened until April. That was far too late. In my mind, I feel that if council does not want to do a moratorium on gas stations, I guess the process then is that if you don't like a decision planning commission does, you would have to act within 30 days to repeal it. And that's fine. I would respect your right to do that. And I think if that's what you wanted to have done for Circle K, you know, I would not have been opposed to that. I would just like there to be better communication between the two bodies, to follow the process, to follow the rules, and don't throw us under the bus however nicely you do it. Because we're there working for you, we're appointed by you, and we all want the best for our city. And it doesn't help when we come across divided like this, particularly to outside businesses who are thinking, do I want to invest in this city? Because I think the applicant for Circle K, we asked him so many questions between September and October. He was probably so happy to be approved and done with us. And to have this come up again, as Mr. Goff has said, is probably a nightmare for him to be facing this. And so he does have my sympathy and empathy in that respect. And I think if the business development economic plan is the next way that we drill down on this and we all, you know, have firmer guidelines, then I am all for that. And I think, as Commissioner Molari said, maybe once a year is not enough. Maybe we need to be more closely on the page so that we can understand the direction that we want to go to. If we're not having moratoriums and we want to avoid having, you know, repeals of decisions, we probably need better communication. I've heard reference at several city council meetings that, you know, city council, you went away and had a strategy session in January. What happened at the strategy session? Is there anything of interest to me as a resident that I would want to know as a planning commissioner? I mean, it's that type of transparency that would be helpful for us to know. Maybe make us more informed planning commissioners as we talk to these applicants and try to do our due diligence and, you know, finding the best businesses that apply. Thank you.
Councilmember Oral?
Yeah, I'll keep my comments short. Just want to touch base, just hit on Commissioner Wong's latest comments. You know, in terms of how the due diligence that you guys did and the possible repercussions of investments from other developers into town, because we were there was a possibility of reneging on an approved application. We hit that pretty hard in our council meeting. I had some pretty strong comments that I think were in line with how you were feeling about that situation. You know, and, you know, again, that's, as I've said before, this was one of those things in the process. You know, this was a big issue, probably a big issue for a lot of communities, and it went through the process that it does. I don't recall, I mean, I've been on here for like 4 years now, and I don't recall it having this issue come up before, right? Meaning like it's not a regular thing. This was new and unusual to me, and I think we've always provided guidance. But I want to get back to what Mr. Hawley was saying, and may I suggest something else too after that? You know, the BDSP is the economic development plan, and I think we need to dive into how we dive into that and begin to put a framework around it. And I think Vice Mayor Joseph started to think about 3 or 4 ideas that provided that guidance. And Mr. Mayor, may I suggest that, you know, I think we've had plenty of discussion here. We open it up to the public and for comments, and then we come back to this and discuss it further. And I think we can align a little bit more on some of those specific framework things, not specific things that we want in town, the specific framework things that we think will attract the specific things we want. if that's said in a way that's a little convoluted.
That's very good. I think we're ready for public comment. So I'll take Commissioner Altman, and then we'll open it up for public comment. Everybody agreeable? Hearing no objection. Okay, Commissioner Altman.
Great, thank you. I was going to actually, Councilmember Oro beat me to the punch because one of the things I was going to ask about was opening things up for public comment because I'm very curious as to what the public has to say, whoever has been listening in to this point. I also wanted to just quickly note that, when we're looking at decision-making process, it is important to remember, and this sort of goes to a little bit of one of the comments that Councilmember Washington made, which is that, the council members are elected, the commissioners are appointed, and there is a distinction. And, I think it's important that we keep that distinction in mind. We're appointed by the council. So we're acting on council's behalf. We're trying to read what the council is looking for. But sometimes it's done without a lot of direct guidance. I also wanted to quickly touch on City Manager Holly's question and say, at least for me, that of the three pieces of the BDSP, I have no issue with the housing component. I think we're fine on that regard. I'd have to go back and read into it. Again, it's been years. But to see where it was and what it stated about, multi-purpose, multi-use development, where you had housing above, retail, basically on a site, and whether that's permissible. If it's not, I think it should be, but that's a more specific item and issue. I think in terms of the transportation issue, a few people, but particularly Councilmember Oro's pointed out the differences between the NVTA and where the city seems to be. And so I think, that's the bigger issues that need to be addressed so that we can enact the transportation pieces within the BDSP so that it makes sense. And then the issue that we've been talking about, which is the economic development piece, I think we're making some good progress in terms of hearing different thoughts and ideas on that. So that's all I've got for now, and I'm really curious to hear what the public has to say.
Very good. At this point, public comment is open. Who's in the queue for public comment?
Yes, Mayor Garcia, we have two people who have raised their
Very
hand for public comment so far. Chris James was the first. Mr. James, please unmute yourself.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes, we can. Good evening. Welcome.
Great. It's really exciting to see this meeting tonight. I think it's the first time I've ever seen this in 11 years that I've been in the city. So this is a really good thing to see. I'd first like to thank everyone for the work that you put in. It's a thankless job, both on the city council and the planning commission. A lot of people complain about things, myself included. Most of the stuff that I try and do is try and get more constructive criticism and give feedback. But I do know that it is a thankless job and it's a hard thing. So to keep that in mind when I'm talking tonight as well. So I want to start off by saying that I'm encouraged when I'm hearing about the moratorium on gas stations. I do want to see that, to press ahead and have further discussions on that. And hopefully, based on the discussion, some of the stuff I'm seeing tonight, it's a favorable outcome for the city. I wanted to touch a little bit on, I was disappointed in some of the, we've gone around a couple of times on this, or you've gone around a couple of times on this in the discussion tonight around the disappointment the council had in the commission on the decision on the Circle K. They had a very difficult decision to make during those two meetings, but the council had plenty of opportunity to go back between those two meetings to either slow it down or to ask more questions or to pull it into the council. So I think going forward, it's a lesson learned. I think it was kind of a difficult time of the year. There was an election going on. I know that there was a point of contention during the election, or questioning and during the election, but it was not addressed back at the council. So I think it's like a lesson learned that we need to pay, both as residents and as city council, need to pay more attention to those meetings. But again, I think because it was happening over the holidays and the ball was basically dropped at this point. There was a lot of articles written about it. People were talking about it, but nothing was ever really done until it was too late to actually stop that. So I think enough said on that. With regard to the Broadway specific plan, I really would like to see the beautification of our central corridor to happen. For that to happen, we need to partner with NVT, Caltrain, all our developer partners. And for some of those things, I think it was touched on. I can't remember, one of you tonight was saying that the NVT isn't playing like a partner with us. But we try really hard. We gave them a couple of meetings back. You gave them a whole bunch of money or forgave them some money for some development they were doing. And so we give all the time to these people, but I don't see it coming back. Caltrain's promised us sequence lights. Whatever happened with that project, right? That's all gone off the boil. So many things that we push, but we need to partner with them. But at the same time, we need maybe play more hardball with them in some ways, right? We seem to be giving a lot to them, but I don't see much coming back our way. So I think it's important that we get this, the downtown thing right. If we screw that up, my concern is that it's going to turn into something that the city may not want, but the outside people may want. And I know, Dave Oro, I know you're a big champion in this, and I see your vision, but I'm a little worried that it's going to be something that's not going to happen because of someone next door to someone is not going to want to sell their land to develop it, and it'll be like a blight next to something. I'm kind of rambling here. So I think it's important that we, press forward with this moratorium. And TJs don't just make decisions based on city population. They actually listen to their customers. There's articles out there talking about how they do make their decisions. So, we could have a concerted effort. We really want a Trader Joe's. I don't think we have a plot of land that the city can support them probably anyway, but we could get a Trader Joe's. We really wanted to, I think. We really, really wanted to. Okay, thank you so much.
Thank you. Next speaker, please.
Yes, Justin Hamilton Hall. Please unmute yourself.
Hello, everybody. Good evening.
Good evening.
Yeah, I agree that city council and your guys working hard. Does not worry about putting some stuff over there. We don't need hotel or gas thing. Just do it. Just build our way. I remember there was field trip for City Hall for PSI. I looked at the sheet of the Broadway. How point nice. Let's do it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay.
Any other speakers?
Yes, Karina Saravente. Please unmute yourself.
Hi, good evening once
Good
again.
evening.
Thank you for doing these meetings. I think we should have a lot more of these meetings. I agree with Commissioner Wong. Once a year is not enough. I think we need a constant reminder to be on the same page. So at least 3 to 4 times a year would be really good. And not also with the Planning Commission, but also the Parks and Rec Commission. I'm here as a resident, not as a commissioner, but I am a Parks and Rec commissioner, and I don't remember having a meeting with you guys, at least in the last 3 years. So I think it's really important that you guys are, we're all as commissioners in the same page. But back to being a citizen, a regular Hispanic citizen here in town. I have to agree with Council Washington be the champion of your city. What he said is so empowering, and it's so nice that he's out there being the champion of American Canyon. And a lot of others do the same. I know Council Oro and all of you guys really try to put your best self forward for our city. I have to agree with also with Council Member Joseph. Farmers market, that it's on a good visual spot. It's we all want the farmers market, but where it was, nobody could see it really. I want to bring out the thing about the gas stations. I really, and I consider myself to be pretty well informed about what goes on in the city. And I had no idea what was going on until Commissioner Wong posted something next door, and I just happened to see it. And then I got interested in it. My husband and I were very vocal with council and online and offline about it. So you guys keep saying that about the 4 gas stations. I think you're forgetting about Napa Valley Petroleum. That's in South Kelly Road, which services large and small diesel trucks. That will be our 5th gas station. So we have a lot of gas stations. So I'm really, I think that we're done with gas stations here in town. I mean, having 4 within 1 mile is just more than enough. But so I hope that moratorium turns to be, whatever you guys are gonna call it, but just be done with it. No more gas stations. I also think that the census results, which I would like to get an update from council or from the staff at the city on census, because that might also favor our city. A lot of these businesses will not come, and that's one of the things that I don't think we do as citizens. We're not informed enough of how these big corporations work. If Costco, if you don't live in a city with 90,000 people, Costco won't even consider your city. Same thing with Trader Joe's. Everybody wants a Trader Joe's. I have to drive to Fairfield or Napa to go to Trader Joe's. They won't come because, we only have 20,000 people here. It doesn't matter how beautiful our city is, or, they have certain guidelines that they follow. But I think that the city needs to, and commissioners and council members need to educate the folks out there. I agree, there's a lot of folks that are very informed there, but there's a lot more that are not informed, and you'll be surprised. So I would like to see some of, in the future, the city has been done a really good job about translating stuff to Spanish. As you know, we're one of the big demographics here in town. I would like to see more of this translating agendas. The city of Santa Rosa, I think that all of their agendas for city council and commissions, they're all translated to Spanish. That's a big chunk and big opportunity to keep your people informed. So some of that stuff, you need to start thinking about it, because yes, we want to inform people, but you got to inform them the right way. So also, I was like cheering at the last council meeting. I was cheering for Council Oro when he said he wanted his money back, because I wanted my money back too when NVTA presented that awful plan. So I really would like to see no more wasting of money on the studies. I've been here for 12 years, and I've seen all these studies and more wasted money, $50,000 here, $100,000 there. for what? For a study that I could, or something that I can, a mayor, a little citizen like me could tell you what was wrong with the lights. And so I feel like we waste all this money in studies, and we have all this dilapidated parks that you could be using that money to get our parks to upgrade our parks, to upgrade our streets. I want to thank you all for doing all the work that you do. I know the size of the agendas that you have to read, and thank you for doing that, whether you're elected or appointed. And so keep up the good work. Do listen to the folks, whether it's on public comment or in person or on social media. You have to listen to the people. That we're the one that is electing you. Remember that. We elect you. So you do have to listen to us, I feel, even if you don't like what you hear. So thank you so much.
Thank you. Any other speakers?
There are no other speakers. If you are on the line and you would like to make public comment, please raise your hand at this time. Going once, going twice. Nobody's raising their hand, Mayor Garcia.
Thank you very much. Okay, so we will turn now to council and planning commissioners. So back to Mr. Hawley's request here on directions going forward. I think you're looking for something more concrete with regard to gas station moratorium. Have I got that correct, Mr. Hawley?
Yeah, that's correct, Mayor. At a minimum, we would like to come away from this to understanding not a decision on moratoriums that would come, in the form of consideration of an actual ordinance, but, what is the temperature? Would staff be well served preparing a moratorium, a permanent moratorium on fueling stations, or do we think this 10-month break is enough to have collected our breath? And this is work plan stuff, but we need to be working on things to get it right if that's the sentiment. And if we're not ready to make that sentiment, we can certainly come back later. But let's at least start with that one. And then we did hear hotels, we heard fast food restaurants. So are there other uses that, because we do have pending applications for both of those other uses. We have pending fast food restaurant applications. We have pending hotel applications. And we do want to learn from our mistakes, as one of the speakers mentioned. We don't want to put the planning commission in a position where it's asked to do something that the council doesn't want. And so staff is interested in getting some specificity here. If the answer is no, commission, just make sure it's high quality, but those uses are acceptable, because that's what BDSP says today. Those uses are acceptable, just make them high quality, then that's clear direction. If we're not sure about these uses, then we need to be thinking about things in a different manner. So I would request we start at least with the gas station uses.
I'm going to start with the one we've already done. That was fast food. We were proposed for a number of opportunities came up. And I think the last one we approved was the Taco Bell across the street.
Mm-hmm.
Again, for me personally, it's an aesthetics issue. Also, it's a product issue at some level. It, I think, takes away from opportunity for independent-owned restaurants like that. Lasso, for example, is the one that came on board after that came out. But we were looking at a point where fast food is all you can have here, we were told by development. Well, we don't want that. Taco Bell, it's not going to be like your high-profile paint lights and all that. You need to tone it down. And it came out reasonably well. So, but I think for me, the fast food issue has been resolved for the time being. Hotels, how many is too many? How much competition can a hotel compete with in this area? Not known to me. I don't know that I have a satisfactory answer to make a decision on that. So I think it's a pause now on that, or there may be opportunity coming down the road. Gas stations, for me, I have participated in the past. I absolutely agree. I don't want this highway to look like gas station alley. The aesthetics is very important to me. my conversation with the developer of Circle K when I had the opportunity to sit down is, look, I want something that has a particular curb appeal that is aesthetically pleasing to the city. It fits in well. I don't need a branding that go back to the Future movie where you have the gas station. That was very popular in the 1950s. Okay, some of the models we've used here haven't changed much past that, and I would be very encouraged to see in my decision on that by seeing what is approved by the commission for the aesthetics of the Circle K. Now, I don't know if you've seen the one up there on Devlin Road near the airport, the accessory building, those mini store behind it. I think fits an appropriate model. The fueling section in the front looks like any high-profile gas station you see anywhere on the freeway. And that's not appealing to me, just for my sakes. So something that on that. That being said, I'm not sure that we can, what the impact of having more gas stations would be in terms of competition from gas companies. So to me, it's more of a pause on that right now. One has given the green light to go ahead. I would like to see what they develop to make sure that it's something that I think that would be acceptable to the community and use that as a model. And that's where I am at the moment. But I could be persuaded about this. Councilmember Joseph.
Yes, and I appreciate this discussion. I think on gas stations, to start with that one, for my purposes, I didn't have a problem with the commission's actions on the Circle K. All things considered, the location and the use made sense to me. My reservations with gas stations is more of a, the nature of the industry kind of a perspective. As I said, I think we're shifting away from fossil fuel vehicles, and so I'm inclined to think that I wouldn't like to see any additional gas stations on the corridor, in large part because I think it's an industry that's going away or is going to transform in some fashion. And just as as much as I'd like to see a clothing store, that's not the industry anymore, so it's kind of obsolete. So for me, I'm okay with formally taking gas stations off the permitted list in the BDSP. On everything else, I have a strong reservation about moratoriums on anything as a rule. I think, as the mayor commented, we should focus on the design standards, the functionality, linking it to other uses. In other words, yes, it's an acceptable use, but we're going to make you go through a whole lot of rigorous standards to make it an ideal use. So for me, I'm okay with the use, but let's focus on the design standards and the quality, and certainly encouraging the types of uses we want. I mean, for example, we only have so many great corners. Donaldson and 29 is one of those great corners. It's got a traffic signal that, it has what everybody wants. So maybe we need to look at those limited number of corners and try to think in terms of how we want to zone that to discourage the kinds of uses that we're not excited about, gas stations and fast foods, and encourage zoning that might facilitate a grocery store or, one of those core items, food, medical service, or youth entertainment. So that would be my approach towards land use specifics. In general, what I'd like to suggest is that we, as a joint session, agree to convene within the next 2 months so that staff has time to take all the comments we've thrown out and try to put together some kind of a draft action plan that would consist mostly of bullet points of some of the issues we brought out, so that the Planning Commission and the Council could meet again and discuss those bullet points so that our discussion is a little more focused, and then we can provide much better direction so that we can put a little flesh around those bullet points. And that would also give us an opportunity to meet again and talk, because I do think this kind of interaction is ideal. And if we're lucky, it may even be in person at some point. But so that would be my suggestion. Stick with the moratorium on gas stations, focus on higher standards for everything else, and put together a bullet point listing of all of our discussion comments so that we can give you better direction within 2 months.
I appreciate those comments, Vice Mayor Joseph. And I want to delve into this quality standards kind of question. You know, staff is interested to know what these two bodies feel about the Taco Bell across the street from City Hall. You know, from our perspective, if you gathered a bunch of architectural students together and had them evaluate Taco Bells across America and had them pick, you know, the top 100, I would put the aesthetics of that one and all of its design features and discontinuous materials and the outdoor seating in the top 5%. I'm not an architect, but if you compare Taco Bell's, you know, apples to apples, it's a pretty high quality standard, you know, and so that's the process of separating high quality aesthetics and standards from use. You may think Taco Bell and fast food restaurants are not a great use, but it's pretty hard to argue apples to apples that building is ugly, or at least compared to other fast food restaurants that building is ugly. It may be ugly compared to, you know, another type of building on another type of use, but that's not apples to apples. If you're just going to compare apples to apples, it's a pretty high quality building. And so one of the things that staff is and that building is very much consistent with Broadway plan, and we can expect other developments that come along in the Broadway plan to have that level of aesthetic to it. And we're pretty comfortable on insisting that level of aesthetic. And so if there is a deeper aesthetic or a better aesthetic than what Broadway already says, we're interested to know that, because we kind of think it's already in there. And we think Taco Bell is one of those examples.
Yeah, I would agree. I think Taco Bell looks good. I think on fast foods, I think Commissioner Goff was right. There's a lot of people who do like and need fast food. I think the challenge is we've got to also be striving for the sit-down restaurants. I think if we have a fair number of both, you know, I think that's what we need to strive for. So, but again, using Taco Bell as an example, I think it is an example of, you know, an acceptable use as long as it looks good. I think the Taco Bell looks good.
That's my point exactly in terms of what we applied to that. I think next up was Councilmember Oral.
Yeah, great. Thanks. So we're going to chime right in on that. And so the thing is you know, I don't want to be, the moratorium is one thing, but I don't want to be a body of no, right? And put things to say no. And I talked about a little bit of flexibility. Listen, I'm down with the moratorium right now. Am I ready to put a stamp on never having it again? Probably, but not right now, because I have the flexibility of a moratorium and an extension, right? The world may change. I don't know. We may run out of lithium ion batteries. I don't know, right? But to having that flexibility gives us, and I think, you know, the way that the moratorium is written, you know, we can do this for 2 years out, and 2 years from now, if it's like, you know what, life is good without extra gas stations, let's kill it there. Like, that's not a decision we need to make right now. We made that decision. Let it ride out. Give us the flexibility of doing something forward. And I'm not, and in the same sense, I'm not ready to say no to fast food, right? The Taco Bell is a great example. That's the first Taco Bell I've ever been to with a fire pit outdoors, right? Which is awesome, right? It kind of fits into the zoning because we set the standards. And I think that's what this body needs to do, to set those standards, to attract that investment. And I also think, you know, I've talked to a lot of, you know, listen, there's a bunch of patting on our backs going on here saying that we need to talk to people. That's our job. That's what we do. That's what we've talked to a lot of people. A lot of people know us. We've heard from a lot of voices, right? We don't need to restate that. What we need to do is take what we've heard and bring it forward here. And that's what we're doing now. And one of the things that I think people need to understand is we are a small town, but we're a new small town. So we're never going to get the sweet, you know, little candy shop on a main drag that has been there for 100 years. But we have opportunities elsewhere where we could probably get shops that are smaller. You know, we talk about fast food as one thing, and those are, you know, there's some design standards that we can bring in there. But there's parts of the Broadway district specific plan that actually call for smaller retail, maybe a bookstore where Adobe Lumber is going to be, right? That is built in. I want to remind people that there's opportunities and all along that corridor. And there's also an opportunity in Watson Ranch in the Napa Valley Ruins and Gardens, right? We are doing things that there's going to be a mix. So go back and revisit the Broadway District specific plan and look at Main Street extending all the way down to South Napa Junction, right? Yes, it is South Napa Junction Road. There's a corridor there for smaller like retail as well as possibly housing and hotels. Those are things that are there. And so rather than trying to think of, we need to be working towards yes and improvement and standards versus thinking about what we don't and don't want, is my opinion.
Next is Councilmember Adamus.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. My comments are going to be fairly brief. I just wanted to say that I'm not at the point where I'm ready to put a moratorium on fast food, hotels, et cetera, but I am ready to put a moratorium on gas stations. I think for the things that are accelerated, such as fast food restaurants, it might be worth considering slowing down. I know that the purpose of BDSP was to provide, make the development process easier. And I believe that we've done that with the EIR and the zoning work and all the other work that we've done with BDSP. So I don't think it would necessarily be a bad thing if, we get like a Burger King application coming through Planning Commission to slow it down or talk about it. For me, it's not just about the aesthetics. It's about Burger King versus Chick-fil-A, right? Somebody said earlier, Chick-fil-A is on fire right now. Have you ever been to a Chick-fil-A recently and not found a line like all the way around the parking, that wraps all the way around the parking lot? And you know what, Mr. Goff, that was an excellent perspective. The constituents that I'm talking to are very different than the ones that you're seeing on a regular basis. And I can totally see how the ones that you're speaking to totally want more fast food restaurants. So I think it's worth the conversation. It's totally worth slowing things down if they need to be slowed down. And I'd like to place that ball in the Planning Commission's court. I would love for you to use your discretion when you're advising us on things of that nature. And that's it. Like I said, brief.
Thank you. Next, Commissioner Altman.
Thank you. I'm going to jump in briefly and sort of try and attack head on the specific points. First is in terms of, what do you call it?
Mr. Altman, there's a lot of interference, static in the background.
I don't know what's going on. I think it's my battery is going out, so hang on. Let me grab a cord and plug myself in.
Okay.
And see if that'll make a difference.
Do you have a modem?
No.
Kind of a high-pitched sound.
Well, I know what you're hearing because I'm hearing it as well.
I don't know if it's on your end or ours.
Now plugged in and charging. I don't know what's going on.
Oh, go ahead. We'll.
Okay. Yeah. Hopefully.
Stand closer to the mic. We can hear you.
Yeah. So, in terms of gas stations, I think it's important to make a distinction between gas stations and fueling stations, because fueling stations, to me, would include electric vehicle charging stations, hydrogen fuel cell stations, and so on. And I think those we might want to keep open, whereas gas stations, if we're going to consider a moratorium, I think it should be strictly limited to gas stations. Although I do tend to agree with Councilmember Oro's comments that time's on our side. Let's use the time. We don't need to rush into a decision on that. Touching on hotels, I think that with hotels, the decision should be based upon the class of hotel. I think we're at a point where we've got, coverage on the, 2 and 3 star hotels. I think that if we consider hotels, that they should be higher level hotels, that we should be looking more at 3 to 4 star hotels. I don't think we need to worry about 5-star hotels at this point. But I think that that's the guidance that I would suggest we look at when it comes to hotels. Fast food, it's more difficult to make a distinction like you can with hotels. But I do think, and this has been alluded to by Councilmember Abadamas and others and so on, there is a difference between certain brands of fast food in terms of the perceived quality. And I think that that's where we need to try, if we can, focus any changes in terms of what we're looking at and create standards that elevate, although I will tell you, I have no idea how we go about doing that, but that elevate the standard that we're looking at so that we're not adding another Jack in the Box, but perhaps we'll add a habit. So that's what I got for you for now.
Thank you. Councilmember Washington.
Thanks, Mr. Mayor. I think from a moratorium or a permanent moratorium standpoint, I would probably support or be the biggest advocate to support no more gas stations. And that would probably be the only permanent moratorium at this time for me. And my reason for that is because I'm looking to the future to our west side connector, our east side connector, and it would just be a matter of time before gas station developers would probably come and try to introduce reasons why we need one down in the west side or the east side connectors. And again, no matter where they are, I don't believe that our city being 6 square miles, 6.6 square miles, need to have anymore. So I mean, if you're looking from my perspective on the gas station, that would probably be the only one that I look at from a permanent moratorium standpoint.
Would that include fueling?
Well, we're playing tricks on words now, and interpretation on words. Anything dealing with gasoline, fuel, fossil fuel, I would be against. We talked about electric stations. Those things don't actually need to be housed and dug up underneath the ground to have tanks. And they can be located in areas that we want to market our city. For instance, Lasso, I frequent that place quite often. It needs something to bring people there. And when we start talking about electric vehicles, for instance, most people, unless you own an electric vehicle, probably don't really understand the concept behind it. I started off with a little Fiat, and then we moved on to the Tesla. So there's different versions, and we can market a lot of areas by people being told where to go to charge their vehicles. And right now in a Tesla, if you punch into their navigation system, it tells you, where to go. Right now it says the closest one is in Napa, right there by the Chevron. But if we put something like that in Canyon Plaza or right there outside of Lasso, where we draw people and make people come to us because they need that charge, we have people sitting there looking, hey, look, let's get a glass of wine or something at Lasso and support that little company there. And then they leave town thinking, hey, man, I found the gem in American Canyon. So we got to think outside the box of how we want to try to draw people to come here. When you put one over in Walmart, they'll definitely go into the locations out there. But we just got to find ways to draw people in. And I think that the charging station, we need to kind of explain more to even the council and the planning commission how electric vehicles actually work. Because until I got one, I really wasn't clear of the benefits and how many benefits come along with that.
Commissioner Wong.
Hi. First, I want to respond to Mr. Hawley's question about what I thought about the Taco Bell. I actually like it. I think it looks nice. My only complaint is I like to walk around town. When I walk to that one, I can't just kitty corner, just walk right up until I have to go all the way down, walk up around the driveway because of the Caltrans easement. He couldn't build a path directly from the corner. That's my only complaint. But I will say there is one nicer Taco Bell that I've been to. That's in Pacifica, right off the ocean. That one's got ours beat, but ours is pretty good otherwise. And about the question in front of us, which I guess really was the driving reason for having this joint session, as to whether there would be a zoning change to disallow fossil fuel gas stations, in the Broadway district specific plan. I know all the council members have weighed in, and I respect your decisions on this. And I'm not going to give you my input on that, but I will say though, is having been on Planning Commission for the last 2 years and having been a pretty regular attendee at city council meetings, probably for a year, 18 months prior to that, I will say that April meeting where you discussed the moratorium, you had so many public comments from residents speaking up against it. I have never seen so much public comment from residents about any topic before. And I really say from residents, because at Planning Commission, we do get our fair amount of public comment. But I think a lot of the public comments we receive, if I'm being honest, they're not from residents. They're from all sorts of people who have a vested interest in the project at hand. But the input that you received in April, those were all from residents. I recognize so many of the names of the people that spoke, as I know you did too. And there was such a larger discussion on Nextdoor as well. And so I would just encourage you to take the momentum and act. I mean, I almost feel like the citizens have come forward in a rare opportunity. They've overcome the natural state of affairs and become involved and been engaged. And to sort of not act now when you have momentum, to me, it almost seems like a step backwards. Yes, you can wait 2 years, but why wait? If you get to the 2-year point and you think we need more gas stations, have a meeting like this and undo it. I mean, personally, that's how I feel. Maybe that's me more with my citizen hat on, but I think your elected citizens have spoken and they've kind of given you a clear picture of what they would like to see. So I hope you listen to them. Thank you.
Commissioner Goff.
Thank you. I guess my comments real quick, and it's really in response to Councilman Washington. He seemed to broaden what we were talking about when it came to the moratorium about gas stations. We were, originally talking about the Broadway specific plan, and yet I got the feeling that through his comments, we were expanding that to the entire city. I just want to make sure that we are clear on, what we are talking about. And this meeting has been about Broadway specific plan. I think everybody's input has been pretty clear about the gas station component. Whether it's a fuel station or gas station or whatever it may be, but I just want to make sure that we're staying within the confines of what we're looking at, and that is the Broadway specific plan.
Question for Mr. Ross or Mr. Hawley. So if a council decides that there will be a moratorium on gas station construction building in American Canyon, can a moratorium be written with a timeline? 2-year moratorium, or can a moratorium be revisited at any time after it's initiated?
My view would be you've got a specific procedure for a moratorium. It's prescribed by statute. So right now, you have to fulfill that statutory time period. You could come to an end roughly next spring and have a pause, and there might be facts where you want to have another moratorium. So there's a statutory procedure that sets a time frame. Once you initiate it, you need to fulfill that. So can you conclude it earlier than that time frame? Yes, you can. But generally, not generally, that's the statutory procedure for moratorium on land uses. If you have a permanent moratorium, you can revisit it. It's just like you can revisit any land use at some time in the future and decide that it now is on the permitted list. So you have flexibility, discretion. But for the moratorium procedure, there's a statutory framework that you have to follow.
So a temporary moratorium could be concluded earlier than the time frame was originally spelled out for.
Nothing to preclude that.
And if you pass a permanent one, you can go back and revisit.
Yes, you can.
Very good. Okay. Then I guess options as well. Thank you. Any other discussion on this matter? Mr. Holly, you got enough direction or comment to?
Yes, Mayor. Just to kind of recap.
Yeah, I was going to say, I think we've got some direction on a couple of items. I originally had proposed the idea of assembling all the or having staff assemble all the comments that have been made and come back in 2 months with another joint session to say, here's the list of things that were brought up. How do we want to react to those? It seems to me that tonight was a very good general, let's talk about it. But I do think to keep the momentum going, as Commissioner Wong mentioned, that we need to meet back in a couple of months to say, okay, here's all the things that were identified. Which ones make a lot of sense? How do they fit together, and give staff a better direction so that from there they can actually put together what I would call an implementation plan for the Broadway district plan. So that's my recommendation or suggestion.
If I'm understanding you correctly, then what you're suggesting is we kind of get a summary of the activities, bullet point. Yeah. Spend some time digesting that, come back in 2 months.
Yeah. That's what I think would be great.
Yeah, I don't even think we're there. I'm not sure what themes we hit outside of, the gas station part. And I don't know if we can finish it this evening, given the time frame that we have. I think what a lot of what we did is we let our feelings out, right? And I don't know if staff has a good direction of where we're headed. I mean,
that's why I'm asking Mr. Holland. Yes.
Well, so Mr. Mayor, if I may finish, I think Mr. Holly paused there, and there are a couple of themes here that are sort of reverberating. Well, I'm going to reverberate what I think, right? Is a flexibility thing, right? Keeping the flexibility within the BDSP and providing guidelines about how the commission approaches that, and whether the council provides more clearer framework around that. And then I think Mr. Vice Mayor Joseph talked about 3 things that he would like to see. So, can we break this up in ways that are thematic, that gives better direction to Mr. Holly? So flexibility is one. Do we look at food and hotels? Is that something else that we look at? Is there infrastructure that needs to be involved in this? And then I think, a couple of people talked about an economic development plan. Again, I would argue that this is sort of the economic development thing we need to do. And then we also talked about standards, right? Do we need to revisit the standards? Those things we kind of talked about. Maybe I agree with Vice Minister Joseph. Let's do it again, refine it a little bit more, less on feelings and more on concrete examples.
Very good.
Yeah, Mayor, certainly staff can organize a subsequent meeting. One of the interesting parts of this discussion for us is how we're seeing this role of the Planning Commission evolve a little bit, and the interest from the council in seeing the Planning Commission's role evolved. Ordinarily, you would expect them to be weighing in around land use matters, perhaps a little bit around some economic development, but it's really land use. And staff came to this conversation tonight focused on land use, and the conversation has been about a lot of other great things. And if there's nothing that says that the council can't seek to involve the Planning Commission in broader things like economic development and implementation of the Broadway plan and all those things, which are traditionally really more something that the council provides, and then direction really to staff. But if we want to have a subsequent meeting, we can bring back some of these ideas and have a little bit refined role of what the Planning Commission is advising on. There's no reason we can't. Really, we had some themes around some ideas that Vice Mayor Joseph had brought forward around storm drain master plans, minimum lot sizes, some of those ideas. We heard ideas about trying to incentivize the right kinds of development, which some ideas around recreational, commercial, local serving versus regional serving, highway users. We had some data needs and requests around data on what kinds of development can a city our size expect versus a city of 40 or 50 or 60 or 100,000. Is there a way to benchmark that to say when you're a certain size you could expect something like this, but if you're 100,000 you might expect more. So not sure if there are ways to benchmark that, but that's sort of a data needs there. We heard generally some themes that development and growth is still good, but really the right kind of that, and that's certainly subjective. But we didn't hear anything around we want to not have any new development. We heard a little bit of themes around residential, saying we still think the residential pieces of Broadway are important and aren't really a lot of change. And then we also heard that there's interest in the gas station moratorium, but that expires in roughly 9 months from now, and there's an opportunity for a 1-year extension beyond that. So there's not a tremendous interest to do something tomorrow on that, because again we've already bought ourselves some time. One of the things I wrote down to myself, and I'm curious about whether there might be some direction on this. It sounded like in general there was some disappointment about the way that our plan is interfacing now with MBTA. And, beyond having subsequent meetings, the city could craft a letter to express, our perspective on what our Broadway plan means, particularly in the context of regional activity that MTC and ABAG have, dictated really in the former priority development areas. So if staff could craft a letter if these bodies thought that was useful. And, I think having both the chair of the commission and the mayor sign a letter that explains some of that would be meaningful. We would deliver that, at the next MBTA meeting as a comment.
I think that would be a good thing to do. I'm in agreement with that.
I'm in agreement with that. And I'm glad you hit that traffic part light, because that was another theme that I failed to mention. And I think we all talked about that, because that is a key component of the BDSP. How do we make that highway more human?
Well, I think it goes back to a lot of the community interest, right? That we heard loud and clear from the community that this issue is important. And you all are reflecting that in your review of BDSP and projects. And so, all of you are put in positions to interact with residents and try and explain, how the world is working. And when you have another body that controls, one aspect of the plan for us, it's important that they know not just what individual council members or councils are feeling or commissions are feeling, but that it's actually a much larger group of 21,000 people.
Well, it's more than just American Canyon. It's the whole valley. I mean, the workforce comes through this city to the benefit of all those jurisdictions north of us. Why do they do that? Because there's no workforce housing there to accommodate that many people. So it impacts all of their tourism industry is dependent on getting people through this city. So, it's we're not in it alone. I certainly raised that issue the last NVTA meeting, starting out with a tone of we need a collaboration between all of us to solve this problem. It belongs to all of us. I'm not willing to have someone other than NVTA or the California Transportation Commission make that decision for us. I'm perfectly happy to put our plan in front of the California Transportation Commission and say, this is why it's important. By the way, if they're not interested in doing capacity increase, which is what this is about, why are we trying to add another lane to Highway 37 to get from Vallejo to Novato? They participate in that process. So yeah, that's my argument. Anyway, that's kind of another topic, and we're off to the mark here. Any other closing comments? I see Councilmember Alvadamas.
I just have a question. Did I miss something while I was off regarding the gas station moratorium? Why are we talking 9 months rather than a permanent?
Generally, after everyone spoke, and I don't know all the different comments that you heard or missed, but generally the consensus was we have an existing moratorium. It expires roughly 9 months from now. At that point, procedure allows another 12-month extension, the total temporary moratorium would be 24 months. And so there are existing procedures in place. There is an existing moratorium today. And so, staff is viewing the collective thought of this group is to say, moratorium doesn't need to be done tomorrow or even next week. There has been a time bought, if you will, to kind of collect our breath, and there wasn't a real clear indication that we ought to be moving forward with that ahead of the expiration of the current 9 month.
Okay. So we're not saying that we're not considering a permanent moratorium. We're saying we have time and it will come back to us once the 9 months expires and then whatever.
I would say that the consensus was it's not the most important thing that needs to be done in the next 2 months. There was also a general, we'll call it consensus around having this group meet again in 2 months and talk about some of the ideas that were identified and some of the data needs that were requested, and to come back in 2 months and provide some additional thought.
Understood. Thank you.
Councilmember Washington.
Yeah, and just to help out Councilmember Abadamos, one of the things I want to make sure that we're clear on is that, yeah, we have 9 months, but we don't wait to the 8th month to try to make this thing move forward. We need to, maybe not act today, tomorrow, but we need to act swiftly, and make a decision, which is, avoiding dragging our feet in trying to make this happen. So I would make a suggestion that, since we have 9 months, at least give us the next 90 days and say we should have an answer or have something on for staff to make permanent. That's in my opinion. And I wanted to quickly address Mr. Goff's statement about how I was making it a wide range thought process for the gas stations, no gas station in American Canyon. And it exactly is that. All of American Canyon is what I'm saying, that we'll have the no gas station moratorium. It's not just directed specifically to the Broadway district specific plan. This is an entire thing. And again, I don't want to play catchwords to say, hey, look, we were just talking about the Broadway district specific plan. When it comes to the moratorium or the permanent moratorium for the gas stations, it is all of American Canyon, because once these corridors start getting developed, the east connector, the west connector, we're going to open up the doors for these people to come back to say they want to put gas stations in these communities.
Yeah.
I just wanted to agree with Councilmember Washington that I just want it to be clear that for me, this moratorium on gas stations is not just BDSP, it's citywide.
All right. Any other comments? It's been a very good discussion this evening. And if there's nothing else further this evening, if Mr. Holly, if you think you have enough takeaway to work on something, then I think we have successfully concluded our work this evening.
Time. It's been very helpful.
All right, very good.
Thank you.
Everybody for your comment, your participation. I totally agree. I think we have to meet more often. I don't know what that timetable looks like, but I don't know if once a year is optional enough. I think at this time, we have topics in front of us. More frequent is going to be better. So I think if we got a couple of 2 months, Mr. Holly?
We're going to need to go through a scheduling exercise. Conceptually, 2 to 3 months. I don't think it would be longer than that. We got to look at
Okay.
Again, we do have other meetings when I schedule at the council.
That's right, yeah.
So,
we
do
other hot plates to work
we
with.
have other business that I'm going to have the council look at.
Right. Does that sound agreeable? Anybody want to offer something different? No, I hear no objection. I see a lot of heads nodding up and down. That's a good thing. Well, planning commissioners, wow, we really value the work you do. You make a lot of very good decisions, and it's not an easy task always. But I will say, from my perspective, I really appreciate the work you do, and I thank you for that. And to my council colleagues, likewise, I appreciate the work you do, and I thank you for that. That being said, we're adjourned for the evening. Thank you again.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you all. Take care.
Thank you.
Bye.